Welcome back, everybody. 28th Annual Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit. Thank you for joining us. Like I've told you a number of times, this will be the last year we do it virtually, although we do have this great experience of having folks able to jump in with us and be on from wherever they are. In fact, one of the first times at the Gathering, which is an Phyllis Schlafly Eagles event in January, we had Jack Posobiec come in over the Skype then. It was before the COVID breakdown, and not a pandemic, but a breakdown. Hey, Ryan, I'm going feedback in my ear. There we go. And so we had Jack Posobiec come in on the before the COVID breakdown. We had Jack come in, and he's been a great friend. He is now a senior editor at Human Events. You've probably seen him all over One America News for years now, and now he's over at Human Events. He's also doing a lot of interviews because his book, The Antifa: Stories from Inside the Black Bloc, which can be found at antifabook.com. And so, welcome, Jack. How are you?
Hey, Ed, it's really great to be here, and I'm glad to know that we're going to be going back to those in-person meetings. You know, I love, and I've been so missing speaking to young collegians as they come through and talking about, you know, what life was like. Because a lot of people, you know, they don't know this about me, but I actually got my start as a college Republican back at Temple University.
Yep.
And actually had the opportunity through that to meet Phyllis when she was still around, and so got to meet her.
Yep.
And she actually brought me down to one of the David Horowitz events they used to do, the Remembrance weekends.
Yep.
And Phyllis was a huge supporter back then, and it just an incredible inspiration for me. This is about 16 years ago now, and then so I really got my start in many ways as a college conservative, a collegiate, and Phyllis was one of the people that, you know, that played a role in that. And so I always tell people, that you know, whenever the collegiate forum calls, you know, I'm always going to say yes, because I know what an influence it was for me at that time, and I know that, you know, there's a lot of different organizations out there that are really focused on youth conservatism. But I really feel that with Phyllis Schlafly, she focuses on what I call the small c conservatism, right?
Yep.
True conservatism, that conservatism of the home, conservatism of the family, conservatism of faith, conservatism of culture. And for so long, and I've just started reading a friend's book about this, you know, for so long it feels like conservatives weren't willing to engage directly in those culture wars.
Yep.
They would just say, oh, the left is bad, the left is bad, the left is bad. But you realize that at some point, and as I certainly found out when it comes to Antifa, these guys are not willing to just go to their side and leave well enough alone, right? That's sort of the modern conservative appeal. They say, well, just say stop and they'll stop.
Right.
No. It's going to take a little more than that. And if you look at the example that Phyllis Schlafly outlined through her life and through her life's work and through her example, she gives us that blueprint to take small c conservatism and explain what it is and why it is the vessel for traditional American values.
Well, and you know, Jack, thanks for those nice comments, and for our collegians that are listening, you're exactly right. And you look at her life; she also was someone who understood that you have to be successful. You have to understand politics. You have to understand what's happening around you. It's not enough to be right on the policy. Yeah. It's not even right on the principle. You have to understand how politics fits together. And again, we're talking with Jack Posobiec. He's got a great Twitter feed. You should follow him there too. But Jack, before we I want to talk about your book, but before we get there, I want to make a different point about what you described. You were at Temple University. I've seen your trajectory, your career trajectory. You didn't go work at a think tank. You didn't go. You went in the Navy, right? You went, and then you worked in China in a professional capacity and learned Mandarin. And so when you're done, you know, in your mid-20s, late 20s, you've got some serious career credentials to say, okay, I haven't lost my way. Now, how do I go and make a difference? How do I undertake things? I think that's important for college kids to hear.
Well, I think that's exactly right. You know, starting in at the college Republican level, and then I was successful enough to become the chairman of the campus chapter of the CRs, and then I became the statewide executive director for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And at that point, DC starts calling and say, hey, you want to intern in this office? You want to intern in that office? And, Bush was still in the White House at that point. So that was, an option that was out there for me. And I don't know, something about it where it said to me where I thought, I think everybody could just go and get some random political internship. And I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think internships are great, by the way, and I fully encourage people to go and do those. But I was also at that same time, right around this 2006, had the opportunity to go and do a study abroad for my last semester in China, in Shanghai, China. And I said, you know what? I bet you a lot of people will have DC internship on their resume. I wonder how many people will be able to say they've learned Chinese in Shanghai and spent time there. So I went over to do a language program, and then ended up being bored because I had been working on so many campaigns and different things when I was still in college that I started poking around. I said, I got to do something else with my time. And I found the Chamber of Commerce there, the Shanghai American Chamber of Commerce, had a sort of a paid internship program, and I kind of bullied them into letting me into it. And I said, "You're gonna hire me because I'm here and I have too much time on my hands, so we're gonna do this." And then and then ended up and then when that was done, one of the sort of the different members of the Chamber of Commerce, and so one of the members was a consulting firm, international consulting firm with ties to Pennsylvania, and they said, "Look, you're really good at this. What are you doing when you graduate?" And I said, I don't know. I mean, I guess I got to get a job somewhere. And they said, well, would you consider staying and working for the firm here in Shanghai? I said, sure, why not? So I ended up staying, doing that for a long time. Had the opportunity to stay, in Shanghai, continue working in international business. I still keep tabs with people who made that decision. And it was very lucrative for them in many of these respects with U.S. companies and what they do in China. But I didn't want to go that route. Part of me just, got homesick, and I didn't quite feel like it was the right move for me. I didn't want to spend my life in China, sort of behind the modern Iron Curtain, as it were. And so I wanted to do something for my country. I felt the call to serve. I mean, I really mean that, right? I know it sounds kind of cheesy, it's sort of cliche, but I felt like I wanted to have military service be part of my life. And so I went and turned away from the international business stuff, came back to the United States and enlisted in the United States Navy, and said, hey, look, guys, do you need any Mandarin speakers? Because I speak fluently. I'd love to be able to put those talents to good use. And let's just say, long story short, after about 8 years doing that, became officer on that track. They put my Mandarin skills in pretty good use.
That's great. Well, it's a great story, and I know Jack. We're talking with Jack Posobiec. One of the things I've watched him do is he's a quality mentor to people. So if you're interested in what he's saying, you have career interests, I think you can find him on Twitter and other social media. So Jack, before we get to the book, I promise we're going to get there. I want to ask you about China for a second. President Trump, he really transformed the American opinion of the problem of China, right? Before Trump, we had both parties would have national candidates and senators that would run for office, and they would always say, I'll be tough on China. We have to figure out how to have China stop stealing our intellectual property and stop taking our jobs. Then they got in office, and the same kinds of trade deals, the same kinds of things happened. Trump changed that, so that by the time he left office, most Americans thought, okay, we've got a big rival, if not worse, with China. We've got to address this. What is the reality? You have a ground sense of it. What is the reality of the Chinese regime, what they really think of the future, how they think of America, and what we should be thinking about in terms of the communist regime there?
Well, so one thing that I do hear from a lot of people that haven't spent much time with the CCP or met any party members or actually had time to even have sort of the diplomatic meetings or spend time with just regular Chinese people in general. Chinese people are great, just the regular citizens there. They call themselves many people call them the 老百姓, which is similar to I guess you could say the deplorables in the United States, right? Just your average ordinary folks. And CCP, they're not they don't hate America, right? They don't hate America in the sense that radical Islam hated America and wanted to destroy us and wanted to kill as many citizens as possible and wreck our economy, et cetera, drag us into these blowback wars. No, the CCP, it's quite more insidious, but to them, it's also more of like a business strategy, right? In the sense where when I was there, I'll tell you an example. I was talking to a party member at one point, and he was saying to me that now back then, this is before there was some currency readjustment of the valuation, the Chinese dollar, the yuan, also known as the renminbi, was 8-1. So it was 8 renminbi to 1 US dollar, so 8-1 ratio. And the thing he said to me was, I dream of a day where the currency ratio is 8-1 the other way, right? So it's not that they want to destroy the United States, right? Far from it. They want the United States and U.S. citizens, and particularly U.S. consumers, to be the consumers of their goods, as we certainly are. But they want us to be in the position that they were, and they want to be in the position where we are. That is the strategy. That is what they want. They want military dominance, military supremacy. You certainly see that in the South China Sea. They want economic supremacy. They want a complete freedom from the international world, sort of the rules-based order that we've set up. They want to be free from any of these treaties or any of the conventions that we see. And that's what their One Belt, One Road initiative is attempting to do. They're linking all of these countries, third world countries, and increasingly countries in Europe now we're seeing as well, offering them things like Huawei 5G, offering them things like building critical infrastructure for them, building government facilities, building railroads, ports, highways, you name it, right? They'll build it for you, and then they'll finance it for you. But then when it comes time to pay, say, "Oh, you can't pay us back. That's okay. We'll just take favorable rights to your mineral resources. Oh, you've got a port on the west coast of Africa, which is on the Atlantic Ocean. Great. You just let us put our naval vessels in your Atlantic ports. And so now, you're looking, and I'm talking 5 years in the future, not even 10, 15 years in the future, you will see Chinese PLAN, People's Liberation Army Navy vessels in the Atlantic Ocean if they continue down this path, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. And so what Trump did, which was so different from all the others, right? They would say they were going to get tough on China, and then they would realize when they got into office how many of their donors were tied into these businesses that were doing sourcing in China or doing some sales in China, and they'd say, oh, well, they can't do too much, right? Because of course the Chinese market is vastly larger than the U.S. market. And so that is tantalizing, right? That is tantalizing for when you've got a market that is 3 times the size, possibly 4 times the size of the United States markets in terms of consumers, right? Just in terms of eyeballs, in terms of people who can buy your product. So when it comes to Hollywood, selling eyeballs is kind of the catchphrase there.
Right.
So Trump was the one who said, we're going to use economic leverage. Barack Obama claimed he was going to pivot to Asia. Trump is the one who actually executed a pivot on Asia and said, we will use economic pain because that is our greatest single leverage point and our greatest single pressure point on the CCP, on the regime of the People's Republic. And that is when he imposed the tariffs on China. That is what ground all of that situation to a halt. And to his credit, Biden has actually kept many of those tariffs in place. Now, the reason for that is simple. It has become absolutely, in the wake of the Wuhan coronavirus pandemic, the very credible possibility that this came out of one of those gain-of-function experiments that were being done in this unsupervised lab in Wuhan. Wuhan, if you guys don't know your Chinese geography, Wuhan is nowhere near the bat caves or this former mine shaft in Kunming. They're almost 1,000 miles apart. So Wuhan is sort of central eastern, whereas Kunming is all the way down towards the border with like Laos and Vietnam, right? These are 2 very disparate areas of China. And so for an outbreak to happen like that, where are the locals? Where's the chain? Where's the chain of custody on all this, right? So many serious questions. And so Biden has realized now that relations with China are completely untenable. This is a situation, of course, that his son was heavily involved in with his private equity firm. We also see his son involved in various other authoritarian regimes. But when it comes to China specifically, even Biden realizes that he has to continue to stay on the road that it was Donald Trump that put us on. And these are things, by the way, that Trump pushed that I, as a junior analyst and then as a member of sort of the China Watcher community, these are things we were talking about years and years before Trump came on the scene. And we said, look, we can pass whatever resolution we want. We can put out whatever UN statement we want. They are not going to listen as long as U.S. and Western interests continue to finance the machine of the CCP that is growing and growing and expanding throughout the world. And Trump was the first person in a position of power to come along and say, you know what? If you're not playing ball, we're going to pull the plug.
Well, all right, Jack, thank you. And I want to ask you about the book, The Antifa, Stories from Inside the Black Bloc,
Yes.
and Antifabook.com. It's selling huge. It's getting a ton of attention. Jack, two questions loaded together to talk about these college kids. One is, on a lot of college campuses, there's Antifa sort of either classmates or running around, probably half the faculty.
Yeah.
And so why'd you write this book? What'd you find? And how do college kids relate to what they see around them? I mean, you've been inside this. What made you do it, and what did you see? Go ahead.
I've got to say, from a as much of a capitalistic opportunist as I am, if any of you college kids are watching this and my name, or like James O'Keefe, we can't go and infiltrate these things anymore because we're too recognizable. But hey, if you've got an Antifa chapter on your campus, go join it, man, and get as much footage and documents and names and IDs and everything else that you can come back and give to us. If you're someone who's not kind of known as like the campus conservative already, because that is the lifeblood. And I operate a network of subsources in various Antifa chapters that has been able to get in and infiltrate. I was able, and this book talks about the times where I've been able to infiltrate myself in early meetings. We take people all the way back to 2016, prior to when Trump was inaugurated. We don't talk about the attack at Trump's inauguration, the Antifa attack, which was planned in a sophisticated manner. They used working groups, they used military-style tactics and operations to attack Trump's inauguration, January 20th, 2017. I infiltrated their meetings in December, the month prior. We were able to provide information to law enforcement. Some of those guys got arrested, not enough of them, unfortunately. And so you can see the disparate treatment when it comes to people with red MAGA hats who are accused of criminal activity. They don't get their charges dropped, but then they ended up, getting these sort of misdemeanor slaps on the wrist. But the entire media establishment turns against them. When it's Antifa, they become a cause celeb. This goes all the way up through 2020, where I was able to infiltrate, go undercover, and embed in the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which is a 12 square block radius of the city of Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, our largest city in the Pacific Northwest, which was taken over by armed militants for a period of about 1 month. And we spent days and nights inside there. And in the book, we document how during the days, generally the worst thing you saw was some scuffles, some fights, or, drugs just profligate throughout the entire area. But when it came to nighttime, that is when criminal elements came in. That's when the paranoia of the people with the long guns and armed munitions were constantly looking for threats. That's when gang activity actually started to take place inside. Because again, if you told someone, the police aren't going to operate in this area, that's what Mayor Jenny Durkan decided, the mayor of Seattle, who will not be running again, by the way, then criminal elements begin to creep in. That's what we saw in Chaz. And it's the point where I'm actually just feet away from Warlord Raz as he's loading one of his handguns and is going off after this guy who's been accused of theft. He's accused of an accused thief. And so, kind of answers that Lord of the Flies or Hobbesian question, if you want to get into the philosophy of, what do you do when order breaks down? Well, is there a natural order, and how does that come out, and how do you deal with these things from a social aspect? And it really became law of the jungle very, very quickly, sort of the survival of the fittest. And, we're seeing all this go down, and we realize it's spiraling deeper and deeper into violence. we got out because we knew the violence was going to get bad, put out a video that very night and said, you need to shut this down quickly. Within just a few days of us putting out that video and saying you need to shut this place down, people started getting shot in there. There were 5 shootings on 4 separate occasions, 2 deaths, including 2 African-American teenagers. One, he was out joyriding on a Jeep and comes up to one of these checkpoints that the militants had set up. And they, didn't trust him, thought it was a bunch of Trump supporters coming in or something. And they just start shooting up this Jeep. They just shoot the entire thing up, kill the teenager. His friend who was in the car with him actually lived, but then they cleaned up the scene. They completely tampered with the evidence and destroyed any ability of law enforcement, Seattle Police Department, to actually be able to prosecute any of these people. So for all of those shootings that have gone on, we haven't seen anyone arrested for the murders, and it's actually been the 1-year anniversary right now.
Wow.
And so we tell these stories. We also get into the history of Antifa, the history of anarchism, the history of communism, going all the way back to Weimar Germany, to the origin story of the CCP with Mao's Red China. So we get into all of these disparate elements that kind of form the nucleus and form the long history of the groups that have eventually evolved into Antifa.
Wow. Well, the book, again, is The Antifa Stories from Inside the Black Bloc on antifabook.com. I know on his Twitter feed it's at Jack Posobiec, and there's a link to where you can buy a signed copy. Hey, thanks, Jack. Thanks for your support of the Collegians effort and of all the Phyllis Schlafly Eagle stuff. And, of course, it would remind you he's a senior editor at Human Events. It's humanevents.com. It's a great website and super history of that entity. So thanks very much, Jack. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ed. You're doing the Lord's work.
All right, thank you. We'll take one of these breaks. We'll be right back.